Hello everybody and welcome to the first proper video that I'm going to be producing for the HLTCO YouTube channel. After the face reveal and all of the sort of fanfare that went alongside that, we are now into what I would class the normal content that I'm going to be producing. As I said in the first video that I produced, I'm not 100% sure how regularly I'm going to be producing these videos, but my aim really is to sort of delve into a deep dive of a topic each time I do grace your YouTube feed. And today I intend to discuss the Daniel Levy /ENIC issues that Tottenham Hotspur fans have had for the best part of the last 20 years, if truth be told. It's a very multi-layered issue. It's one that I took to Twitter to ask many Spurs fans for their views on. I was overwhelmed by the number of direct messages that I received from Tottenham fans giving me a list of their grievances and their frustrations with the whole board structure. Thanks to everyone that has got in touch with me. I've responded to, I think, pretty much everyone, but there will be, I'm sure, a fair few people still that haven't received messages from me. But I have read every single direct message that has been sent alongside my own research. And as I say, the purpose for this video today is to really give an insight to people from outside the Tottenham Hotspur bubble as to exactly why there is such a degree of animosity towards ENIC and Daniel Levy when it comes to their ownership of Spurs. As I said, it's a very much multi-pronged issue, and with that in mind, I have taken quite extensive notes. I know that from a content creator perspective, it's not necessarily the most professional thing to glance across at a screen and take notes or look at notes when recording a video like this, but I think it's important from my point of view that I get across the specific details when it comes to, grievances and gripes that fans have had, because it's a long-term prospect. This, 20 years of their ownership has led to a multitude of issues that have come to the fore at different times, and I want to leave no stone unturned really. I'm not 100% sure how long the video is going to go on for, but I want to make sure that I do it to its full potential and make sure that every single aspect of the reason for Spurs fans feeling so aggrieved at the whole Daniel Levy ENIC era, and make sure that it's covered in its fullness. So the first thing to really touch upon is that it is a multi-layered issue. I'm sure there will be plenty of neutrals out there hopefully watching this, given the prospect of it spreading far and wide, who are a little bit baffled by the level of animosity that Spurs fans have towards their ownership, because from an outside point of view looking in, they've got a brand new stadium, they've got a very solid balance sheet, they have regular Champions League football, Harry Kane's there, you've got Antonio Conte, Heung-min Son. They have elevated the level of Spurs across the last 20 years, undeniably, from a club that were mid-table but never really in danger of going down, into one that can regularly expect to be involved in European competition. And I suppose, if you are on the outside looking in, that is a very solid measure of success. But ultimately, and I think, I'm going to delve into specific issues on this video, of course, but the reason that neutrals will look at Spurs and see them as a successful entity is because they have been run very, very successfully from a business perspective. And that in itself, in isolation, is of course fantastic. And you can look towards that and say they've done a very good job in terms of the finances and the overall financial health of Tottenham Hotspur FC. But it also is, I think, the crux of the issue for many Spurs fans when it comes to their specific view of ENIC and their overall approach to owning the football club. The initial investment in Tottenham from ENIC was not made with any specific footballing glory in mind. There is actually a direct quote here from when they first took over the football club. They said, "The decision to take this club over is solely for business purposes. We believe football to be the biggest money spinner, and that is why we are here." Of course, you can look towards the last 20 years, the move to the new stadium, the regular Champions League football that I've just mentioned, and suggest on the pitch the success has been there for all to see. But and this is, as I say, it's almost an onion, this conversation. It's not something that can be boiled down to a 2 or 3 minute soapbox rant. But it's not just the case of them being aggrieved at one trophy in 21 years. It's the method by which they have been unable to secure more silverware and make progress on the pitch. And I think across this video, hopefully, I will give a decent insight into exactly why Spurs fans feel so disillusioned with the direction or lack of that they are currently seeing under Daniel Levy and ENIC's ownership model. Of course, the move from White Hart Lane was a big one. It was one that the entire ownership structure said was needed if they were going to take the step to the next level. The idea behind it, of course, being that with greater hospitality income, with greater match day income through gate receipts, they would be able to punch a far higher weight than they had been able to previously. But I think, that in itself is a decision that the Tottenham Hotspur fans accepted at the time. I think they understood that it was the next logical step for them in trying to become an established Champions League outfit. You need to capitalise on the season ticket waiting lists and the ability to get more bums on the seats, get the NFL, get the concerts, etc., etc. But alongside that, there was a belief and an understanding from Tottenham Hotspur's fans that the extra money generated by all of those extra bums on seats would eventually lead to greater investment in the team, and ultimately that just hasn't come one way or another, although that in itself is quite a multifaceted issue. Of course, you can look towards the investment that they have made in the first team since the departure from White Hart Lane to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and say that extra money has been pumped into the team, but I think this is where you can sort of peel back the layers a little bit and examine the exact reasons for Tottenham fans' grievances. And the main crux of it, as far as I can tell, is not that money has been spent, because it quite clearly has, but instead it's on the targets that they have actually secured, because quite often they have had managers that have made it plainly clear they need a rebuild, they need this certain player, this certain position filled, and over a mixture of haggling or inaction from Daniel Levy, they haven't been able to strike when the iron is hot, and ultimately that over the course of 5 or 6 years has led to a sense of apathy creeping in when it comes to Tottenham Hotspur fans' view of the ownership, because it's almost as though, from the extensive conversations that I've had with Spurs fans, they want to play at being a big club in air quotes, but if you aren't prepared to put your money where your mouth is and commit to these projects, then ultimately those aims and suggestions of ambition are going to fall short through inaction. And I think that is exactly where we find ourselves in 2023 with the general perception of the direction that Daniel Levy has taken that club in over the last 10 or so years. Of course, a huge factor in the overall recent history of Tottenham Hotspur was the sacking of Mauricio Pochettino, a manager that had Tottenham fans eating out of the palm of his hand pretty much every moment. I think you can speak to probably 95 to 95% of match-going Spurs fans at least and say that, he was viewed as a man that had sort of turned water into wine and produced miracles with the team that he got to second in the league. Of course, they didn't go on and win the title when it looked like they might have done, but at that particular point, when he was sacked, I think prior to it he had spoken of the need for a very long-term and painful rebuild and was relieved of his duties, and there has been grievances ever since with that decision from Tottenham Hotspur's fans, because as far as they were concerned, Mauricio Pochettino understood that squad, he understood exactly what was needed, and rather than dip their hand into their pocket and back the manager that had brought them so much success and almost made Tottenham into a far more valuable and saleable asset than the one they had initially inherited, they decided to relieve him of his duties and move on to pastures new. And I'd honestly believe it is a gaping wound that has never really healed in terms of the Tottenham Hotspur fans' relationship with the board and the decision makers further up than the simple coaching staff that existed there when Mauricio Pochettino was in charge. You can then look towards the appointments of Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte as prime examples of the muddled strategy that has taken hold really across the last 5 or so years of Tottenham Hotspur's ownership, because in Mourinho and in Conte they have got two managers who undeniably are what you would class as win now managers. They will want backing in the transfer market heavily, they will want the squad that they ask for, they will feel as though they are on a 2 or 3 year pathway rather than a long-term project that they are building. But with that in mind, if you are Daniel Levy and you are going to go for a Jose Mourinho or an Antonio Conte, you surely have to dive in two-footed rather than just dipping your toe in the water and hoping that the manager himself will be the key to unlocking all of the riches that can come their way if indeed they are backed properly. I understand that you can look towards global football finance and suggest that it's not just a case of throwing money at something, because there are many, many different ways to gain success as an elite football club. But if you are going to appoint these managers, your Mourinhos, your Contes, surely the overall aim of that is to back them in the short term rather than try and build organically across 10 or 15 years, because with the best will in the world, Mourinho and Conte are never going to be at places like Spurs for that long. It's very much win now or bust, and by showing that sense of inaction, by pushing the transfer targets that Mourinho wanted or Antonio Conte currently wants to the back of the line, and instead haggling over minute sums of money, you are only surely shooting yourself in the foot as an ownership model that seemingly wants to produce that win now mentality. I think Pedro Porro is a prime example of this, a player that Spurs have been very open about their desire to sign. Sporting Lisbon have been very, very transparent in terms of their demands to let him go. I believe he has a release clause formally of around 45 million euros or 45 million pounds, and it would be a very simple deal to do if Tottenham just put up the money that was necessary to meet that release clause. They could get him in. I think Porro is more than happy to sign. He wants to play for Conte. He wants to join Spurs. They could have got him in a week or two ago, bitten the bullet, paid that sum of money and moved on to future targets. But instead, as far as I can see from conversations that I've had with Spurs fans over the last 48 hours or so, there is an extreme level of haggling taking place. And this isn't a new thing. This is a trend that has been in place at Spurs pretty much throughout Daniel Levy's tenure. You will get people across the media football landscape suggesting that it's incredibly savvy business, that he is a hard negotiator, that he will always get the best deal for Spurs. But as the recurring theme of this video really centres on the fact that football is not like a normal business. You are not necessarily rewarded by your stakeholders or customers in the guise of fans by being pragmatic, by getting the best deal financially, by constantly moving the needle so there's more money in the bank balance. It's about trying to win, trying to achieve glory, and ultimately, if you are going to haggle for, say, 2 or 3 months over the potential signing of Pedro Porro, only to then miss out and him go elsewhere, it will just lead to a greater sense of apathy and frustration from those that are filling your ground or filling your away end week after week. I think as well, if you are a neutral, it will be a very much reductive thing to say that the lack of trophies across the last 2 decades is the real reason for the sense of frustration that Spurs fans have been feeling for so long. And of course, it plays a major part. There is no denial of that. Had they won the Champions League, had they won a couple of FA Cups, had they gone all the way the year that Leicester City won the Premier League and managed to secure that themselves, it would have softened the blow significantly. But I think mainly at this point, as we speak now, at the beginning of 2023, the real frustration is that the board, Joe Lewis, ENIC, Daniel Levy, whoever you might want to specifically name there, haven't struck when the iron is hot. They haven't made the moves that were so clear to fans, so clear to coaches, so clear to casual onlookers across the last 5 years or so to really improve that squad and make sure that it can continue to compete at the top level. And that's where Mauricio Pochettino's whole argument comes in, because he had built a side there that was capable of challenging at the top of the table. He knew that changes need to be made, that a rebuild had to be undertaken, and when he made that point clear in public, he was relieved of his duties. And I think really, as much as you can point towards Mourinho, you can say Conte's there now, the failed experiment with Nuno Espirito Santo, that relationship that Pochettino built with the Spurs fans was one that felt organic, that felt like a long-term project that he had almost struck gold with. And I don't think in any way Daniel Levy or those above him within the ENIC structure truly understood what they had on their hands in Pochettino, and had they actually backed him when the moment was right, they may not be in a situation where conversations like this are taking place in 2023. And it's not just the haggling over incomings that is a gripe for Spurs fans. There is also a firm belief throughout their fan base that deals could have been done for players who have departed for far more money. Christian Eriksen, a prime example of this, a player that I believe was having offers made for him of 40 to 50 million pounds, ended up leaving a window or two later for just 15 million pounds. We saw Danny Rose, the hot topic at that particular point, end up leaving the club a year or two later for next to no money. Alderweireld, a 40 million pound offer I believe was made to Spurs for him. He ended up leaving the club a year later for free. And as much as you could argue that Daniel Levy tried to look after the best interest of Tottenham Hotspur, tried to make sure they weren't bullied and sold their best players when they didn't want to, there has to be an element of realism in all of this. And if they are going to be a club that doesn't put money in from outside sources, if they want to be self-sustainable, if they want to finance the team properly, then it is a case of understanding the true value of your players and selling at the opportune moment, rather than hanging on for grim death and allowing your players to leave for pittance compared to what could have been generated via their sale a year or two previously. It's difficult, of course, because you can look towards clubs like Brentford and Brighton, and this isn't me for one moment suggesting that Brighton or Brentford operate on the same level as Tottenham Hotspur, because of course in terms of pedigree, in terms of their place in the league, in terms of their yearly expectations, they are poles apart, albeit you could argue that the gap is shortening with every year that passes. But there is a clear structure in place there. I have been very vocal about Brentford on my podcast over the last couple of years. Matthew Benham is an owner who has a long-term plan. I've said numerous times that Thomas Frank, as boss, is obviously a fantastic guy. He has done a great job, but I firmly believe were Thomas Frank to be poached, there would be another manager in place at Brentford within a couple of weeks who would just continue the good work, and the overall structure would remain pretty much unmoved. You can look towards Brighton as another example of this. Graham Potter left for Chelsea, took a large number of his staff with him. It was looked upon as a real disaster for the Seagulls given the gradual progress they had made under his guidance. But you look at Roberto De Zerbi, you look at the football they've continued to play, the fact that his coaching staff are well embedded there, it's not a coincidence. That is because there is stability behind the scenes and there is a long-term plan in place on the South Coast and in West London. And you look at Spurs as a far bigger club than either one of those, and it just feels muddled, it feels like a mess, and it's because of this change in structure all the time, going from a project manager to going to two win now managers, not backing those managers with the players that they wanted at the time, not listening to Mauricio Pochettino when he said that a project needed to be undertaken and it was a rebuild that was going to be painful and it was going to be long term but that he was committed to. Instead, they've tried to go with the win now option, but they haven't followed through with it with the money necessary and attracting the targets necessary to actually make that a success. And it's this lurching from one style to another which has ultimately led to a position where the Spurs fans just feel as though Daniel Levy, ENIC and everyone else behind the scenes above the manager themselves aren't actually in tune with the way that football works in the modern game. And I can completely sympathise with it. You know, it's obviously easy to talk about the flavour of the month, whether that be a Brentford or a Brighton, but when you have watched your club sort of fly so close to the sky so many times and then falter, you have to start pointing fingers at those that have been there the longest. And, you know, I'm not suggesting that Antonio Conte or Jose Mourinho's football is the most pleasing on the eye, but if you're not going to back them in the market, given everything that we all know about both of those managers, where ultimately should the blame lay? I spoke to one particular Spurs fan who said that last summer there was a promised injection of £250 million that would be used to improve the first team. By his calculations, roughly £100 million of that has been spent. He obviously, alongside others, is very much concerned about where this extra £150 million has been soaked up or whether it will be used. But the lack of communication is also a huge bugbear of Spurs fans, because ultimately I think they understand that they can't necessarily, from a realistic perspective, look to match the spending of your Chelseas, your Manchester Uniteds, your Newcastles now with the incredibly deep pockets they have been blessed with thanks to the Saudi Public Investment Fund. But the lack of communication from the board towards the Spurs fans is really the main reason for their disillusion, because if you haven't got that sense of cohesion, if you don't feel that Daniel Levy and ENIC as a collective are actually doing the best thing for the football club and instead are just looking after their own pockets and their own bottom lines financially, then it will breed this sense of apathy and frustration. And, you know, I'm acutely aware that I'm speaking to you on this podcast this morning, on this YouTube video this morning, and it is a hot topic, but the reason it is a hot topic isn't because Manchester City have just beaten Spurs 4-2 after being 2-0 down. It's because of the long-term trend that has set into that football club, and I think it's a conversation that is worthy of having, because of course, you know, if you support a League One or a League Two club, you can easily look towards Spurs and suggest that they don't know they're born. You know, European football. I'm a Palace fan. We have never had European football in my life. There's a good chance we never will. But I can still understand from a scalable perspective why the frustration for Spurs fans is there, because undeniably the money is there. And to see it not being invested back into the team when the promise from the new stadium move was that every single penny would be reinvested back into the squad, it's going to hit you very hard as a supporter that spends your hard-earned money every single week following the team all over the country. There was actually a report published only a week ago which stated that Tottenham Hotspur were the 9th richest club in terms of annual turnover anywhere in the world. And that in itself is a prime example of why Tottenham Hotspur fans feel so aggrieved, because I'm not suggesting that spending should be fast and loose. As I've just mentioned, you can look towards a Newcastle or a Manchester United and say that you can't necessarily match them pound for pound. But if you aren't going to go over key targets, if you're going to settle for second or third rate options, if you're not going to strike when the iron is hot, if you're not going to grasp the nettle and really push through with the momentum that certain managers have been able to build or could be able to build if their projects were given time and backing, then what are you in it for? Unless it is simply for the NFL fixtures, for the concerts, for the overall bottom line, for the turnover. And that in itself, I think, as a microcosm, is exactly why Spurs, as a collective entity fan-wise, have every reason to be frustrated. It is worth highlighting that there have been all sorts of high points throughout the 20 years of ENIC's ownership, and that is an important counterpoint. You know, it's not as though it has all been doom and gloom. They have transformed them into a regular European appearance maker. They have transformed them into a club that have a far better stadium, better facilities, better training ground, etc, etc. They had an unbeaten season at home under Pochettino. The emotional bond that was built with the Argentine as manager was there for all to see. But alongside that, you know, you look towards an 18-month period where Pochettino wasn't given a single signing, and it just feels like they get into third gear and somehow the car manages to stall. And that has been a consistent theme throughout the 20 years of Daniel Levy and ENIC's ownership. And eventually it will wear thin. You know, you can look towards their place in the top 4 or top 6 of this country, and because of the sheer financial muscle that they now have and can generate through the NFL fixtures, through the concerts, through the amount of tourists that they can get through the door week after week at their new stadium, they are in a very strong financial place. But if you aren't going to match that with ambition in terms of your market moves, you are always going to be playing with fire when it comes to a fan base that feel they have been sold not necessarily a dream, but they have been told certain things about the future of the club, about the reasons for moving from White Hart Lane, which ultimately haven't been made good on. And you can look towards Harry Kane, you know, a player that, and this is, you know, an individual that I have spoken about at length on my own podcast over the last couple of years. It is not my personal belief that his career will be defined by trophies alone, because his record in terms of goals for Spurs is absolutely astounding. He will, for my money, go on and break the all-time Premier League top goal scorer record, whether that be with Spurs or another club. But it is reaching a point now where it looks as though he will move on, and you can't necessarily begrudge him because he has given his best years to Tottenham, and the squad around him has not been bolstered to anything like the level it should have done. You know, they've got arguably, I say, the best finisher in world football. He's certainly top 5. Of course, that's a completely different conversation, and one maybe for another video another day. But he was given to Spurs through the academy for free. They haven't had to invest in him, and with that in mind, they could easily have put tools around him that would have given managers, whether that be Pochettino, whether it be Mourinho, whether it be Conte, a greater chance of delivering on the trophies that are there potential wise. But they haven't been able to do that, and that is why we find ourselves in this situation. For what it's worth, I don't actually think Spurs fans as a collective entity would necessarily be against a project manager, a Graham Potter, or another version of Pochettino. I think they fully bought into that idea. The squad felt together, it felt young at one point, it felt dynamic, and of course they did almost get a Premier League title under their belts. They managed to make it to that Champions League final. We had fantastic success without getting over that final hurdle and lifting a trophy. And maybe that is where Spurs fans are happiest, you know, looking at a squad that they can see gradually building. But to do that, you need a manager that is set up in that mould. And Antonio Conte, with the best will in the world, is not that. Which leads to this muddled view of the Spurs ownership. Because on one hand, they've appointed Mourinho, they've appointed Conte, but they haven't approached it in a way that an archetypal big club would. You know, if a Chelsea were to appoint Antonio Conte, as they previously have, of course, or a Mourinho, as they previously have, they throw money at it. They are aware that it's probably a 2 or 3 year marriage. It's one that will probably end in combustible fashion, but it will probably also generate trophies for that football club. And if you go into it with that mindset, the chances are that it's a marriage of convenience, and one that will fizzle out eventually, or maybe go out with a bang. But it's almost as though Daniel Levy wants a long-term project with a manager that isn't set up to actually deliver upon that. And if he just went fully back to a Pochettino type model, he looked to get him in, he looked at, I'm not talking about Pochettino specifically here, but another man in that mould, then I don't think Spurs fans as a collective entity would have any great deal of problem with that. It's the muddled thinking with the transfer business, or lack of, the haggling over transfer targets, the fact that Antonio Conte is putting pressure on that board to see through on their main targets and make sure that they do actually, strike while the iron is hot, and them not doing that, which has led to this position of apathy. You can look towards Mourinho specifically here, and a week in that tenure, the final week, he was fired 5 days before a cup final. And, I'm not going to be a Mourinho apologist on this particular video. I understand that he is Marmite. There are certain people that love him, certain people that loathe him, and that will be the case inside Tottenham Hotspur's fan base to this day. But ultimately, if you're going to bring Jose Mourinho in, the reason for it is to win trophies. And 5 days before a cup final, Daniel Levy and Spurs took the decision to get rid of Jose Mourinho. There is a high chance, in my own personal point of view, that they would have gone on and lifted that trophy, and you only, or at least I can reach the conclusion that the main reason and motivation for relieving him of his duties and giving him that P45 5 days before the cup final came about because he knew that as soon as the trophy was lifted, it would have been very, very difficult for him to sack Jose Mourinho, given the trophy drought they'd been on. And of course, it then took 8 weeks for them to appoint a new manager. That ended up being Nuno Espirito Santo, and the less said about his tenure as Spurs boss, the better. So even then, there wasn't a clear plan or objective in terms of replacing Jose Mourinho. It was a case of making it up as they went along, and ultimately making an error with the man they decided to replace him with. You can then throw in the sky-high ticket prices. I believe season tickets at Spurs are about £995 to £1,100. You can throw in the ESL and Tottenham Hotspur's decision to throw their hat into the ring when that entire project came to the fore, alongside your Arsenals and your Manchester Uniteds. As much as there were plenty of jokes made about Spurs being part of a European Super League given their lack of trophies, as a supporter base, they felt betrayed. They felt as though ENIC and Daniel Levy only cared about the bottom line, only cared about the riches that were potentially on offer were they to join that European Super League. And ultimately, it's the perfect example of the way that they have treated Spurs over the last 20 years. You can't necessarily say they haven't been successful by certain measures, but from a footballing perspective, it just feels as though they are completely out of tune with what Tottenham Hotspur fans want and expect from their football club. And it's almost reached a point, I think, where the club itself is so profitable and so well run from a financial perspective that it will be very difficult to get them out. I was speaking to Spurs fan about this morning prior to recording the video, and he sort of made a comparison with Everton. If you look at Everton, the financial power that they have is nowhere like the same as Spurs. There's a huge amount of financial peril, in fact, linked up with Everton and the potential of them being relegated with a new stadium being built. There is an imperative need for them to retain their Premier League status, and it is, on a knife edge. With Spurs, I think it's quite clear that even the worst season for them will probably see them finish 6th or 7th, and then they will bounce around between, say, 3rd and that position, given the strength of the squad that's already there, given the money they can generate purely through their own revenue streams. And that in itself means that the ownership will be under no real pressure or feel no need to move on. It's a sad state of affairs for Spurs fans, because they can't really force them out. Any protests fall on deaf ears because ultimately, as was pointed out at the very beginning of their tenure, they've joined in with Spurs, not because of footballing reasons, but because it's the biggest money spinner. And, however you might feel about their success or their stability from outside looking in, if being a football club like Spurs isn't about striving to win things, then you have to question what the point of it all is in the first place. The bottom line here, and I appreciate that I have rattled on pretty extensively for however long this video has run now, but the bottom line for me is that Daniel Levy, Joe Lewis and ENIC as a collective entity are not football people. They are money people who have been, by big business measures, very, very successful in the way that they have approached it. But ultimately, football and football clubs are not like normal businesses. There is a huge amount of emotion wrapped up in every single game, in every single decision, in every single week. And, you know, a normal business, let's take Coca-Cola for example, does not have the emotions and joy of their customers or stakeholders in the palm of their hand every single week. That is what Tottenham Hotspur do. It's what every football club do to those that follow them and care so deeply about them. And that is why there is such a disconnect between those in the boardroom and those that pay their money to go and watch Spurs every week. And it's baffling to me that after 2 decades in the role, there seems to be a complete lack of understanding from those that are calling the shots and holding onto the purse strings as to the exact reasons for the grievances. It's almost like there's an emotional vacuum in the boardroom at Tottenham, and I can't really get my head around it. You know, I understand that from a money point of view, it makes a great deal of sense, but you'd have to be emotionally dead inside to not understand the need for communication, the need for a greater plan, for more cohesion, for a manager to come in that actually understands what the project is and buys into it fully and get buy-in from the board to that end. And really, hopefully, I have summed up the vast array of reasons why Spurs fans feel so aggrieved. It's obviously a far bigger topic than I've been able to cover here, but I think I've done a reasonably decent job of summarising it, or at least I hope I have. If you've enjoyed the video, which hopefully you have, please do consider pushing the subscribe button, give it a like, because this is a very new channel. It's a new venture for me. It's something that I'm very hopeful of taking off and really growing over the next few years. I am very much in it for the long haul. If anyone follows me on Twitter and this is the first time that you've seen me create a YouTube video, you know, I'm not going to just go out with a bang in 3 months. I intend to create content regularly across the next few years and build this organically. Please do comment below on the video as well. I'd love to get feedback from Spurs fans or neutrals as to your view of exactly what has been discussed here. And yeah, please do come back. Please do continue to support the channel and support me over on Patreon or on Twitter. If you're unaware, I actually do a daily Palace podcast and a daily general football podcast Monday to Friday. That is £2.50 for the month, which I like to think is good value for money. So if you do enjoy this video and want to hear more from me on a daily basis, the link to my Patreon will be below in the description for this. But other than that, hope you've enjoyed the video and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye for now.